Staying informed these days, it can feel like a full-time job.
Yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Right. I mean, you're trying to keep up, but the news cycle just never stops.
Yeah, you feel like you're always behind.
So that's where the deep dive comes in.
Yeah.
We're here to help.
We try to help.
Where you send us whatever you're reading, the articles, the studies,
The stuff that's catching your eyes.
right, whatever's caught your eye. And we try to make sense of it all without totally overwhelming you.
Yeah, without the information overload. We try to carve out like the most crucial stuff.
Right. And this time you've given us a really fascinating set of topics. I'm excited to get into it.
I know, right? I mean, we got a boycott against a major retailer.
Yeah, Target.
Right, Target.
Yeah.
And we're talking about some serious concerns around national security.
That's right.
And then there's this whole movement that's growing, in the black beauty industry.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
We're looking at efforts to improve wildfire response here in California.
Big issue, right?
Huge. And then potential shifts in social safety net programs.
So much to cover.
I know it might seem like a weird mix at first glance, like what do all these things have in common?
Right.
But, our aim is to really dig into each of these, pull out the key insights.
Exactly.
And maybe even, you never know, we might spot some connections along the way.
I love when that happens.
Me too.
All right, well, let's jump in. The first one that's caught my eye is the Target boycott. This has been all over the news.
Yes, definitely.
Led by Reverend Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant.
Right, Reverend Bryant.
And the boycott was timed around then. Lent ran from March 5th to April 17th.
Yeah, they really made a statement with the timing.
And it sounds like it really gained some serious traction.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what's at the core of this boycott?
So Reverend Dr. Bryant initiated this boycott based on, his assessment of Target's business practices.
Right.
He's asserting, basically, that Target has been neglecting the black community.
So it's really a call for greater accountability and, I guess, a demonstration of their purchasing power.
Yes, exactly. And the figures we're seeing, they suggest that his message really resonated. I mean, they're reporting over 150,000 participants in the boycott.
That's a lot of people.
That's huge. It wasn't just individuals, though. It wasn't just people making personal choices.
Right.
We're also hearing that over 100 Black-owned businesses pulled their products from Target during the boycott.
Wow, so you have this really coordinated effort between consumers and vendors.
Yeah, it's a powerful message.
And I imagine that kind of collective action makes a much bigger statement.
It does. It speaks to a real sense of solidarity among Black vendors. They're setting clear expectations for how major retailers should engage with their community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also been reporting on the financial impact, which is pretty hard to ignore.
For sure. They're saying Target's stock price dipped by $12.
Wow.
And their overall value went down by $2 billion.
That's a big number.
It is. Those kinds of figures, they definitely get a company's attention.
Right. And it makes you wonder, are these financial reactions, are they really the best way to measure the success of a boycott?
Yeah. I mean, is a short-term stock dip or a drop in value, does it really indicate lasting change, or is it just like a blip on the radar,
Right. Could just be a temporary market reaction.
Exactly. Something to think about as we follow this story.
Definitely. And, this Target boycott, it's not happening in a vacuum. There seems to be a larger context here.
You're absolutely right. So at the same time that this was all happening, the NAACP
Oh, wow.
and the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which represents the Black press of America, they announced their own plans
Interesting.
for a national public education and selective buying campaign.
So they're really getting involved.
Oh, yeah. And they're directly linking this to their concerns about Target and, other corporations as well.
Right.
That are basically scaling back their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
PEI.
Right. DEI. It's becoming a big issue.
So it sounds like there's a broader concern about a potential trend we're seeing in corporate America.
I think that's right. The language that the NNPA used was very strong.
What did they say?
Danny Bakewell Sr., who's the chairman emeritus,
Okay.
and Bobby R. Henry Sr., who's the chairman they called these actions, renewed Jim Crow racist policies.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, really heavy stuff. They're putting this squarely in the context of systemic racism.
Right, which has a whole other layer to it.
Exactly. It shows you how seriously the Black press is taking these developments.
And the NNPA, they emphasized their unique role as a trusted voice in the Black community.
Yeah, that historical connection is very important.
Absolutely.
They're signaling that they're going to use their platform to address these issues head on.
Right, which reminds us of the importance of Black media in advocating for racial and economic justice.
Exactly.
So what about Target's response to all of this? Have they engaged with the boycott leaders at all?
So interestingly, Reverend Dr. Bryant said that Target hasn't directly communicated with them at all.
So no dialogue.
Not yet. He did speculate, though, about the White House maybe being involved somehow.
Really?
Yeah, he thinks they might be discouraging meetings behind the scenes.
That's fascinating. It's like a whole other angle to consider.
Right, like who are the players here? And then he made this comment about President Trump and toilet paper, which I thought was funny.
Okay, I missed that. What was that about?
Well, he was referencing past situations, where consumer choices became very politically charged.
Right, right.
So he's highlighting his demand for real engagement, not just symbolic gestures.
Oh, I see. He wants action, not just words.
Exactly.
So it really raises questions about the interplay between corporate actions, political pressures, and civil rights movements.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's not just about economics anymore.
Right, right.
And Reverend Dr. Bryant, he also spoke about the Black church and its historical significance, in the fight for civil rights.
Of course. Such a long and powerful legacy.
Absolutely. But he also acknowledged that younger generations might view the church's role differently today.
That's interesting. How so?
Well, in terms of how they engage in social justice, the ways people participate in activism are always evolving.
Right.
And traditional institutions like the Black church, they need to adapt
Makes sense.
while still holding on to, their position in the community.
Right. Finding that balance.
Exactly.
So what happens now?
Well, Reverend Dr. Bryant, he had a really clear message. Maintain the pressure.
He wants to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, he's urging continued focus and support for the boycott to make sure it has a real impact.
Right. Make sure it's not just a temporary thing.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
Absolutely. And the NNPA is standing right with him. Their president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., he came out strong in support.
Oh, wow. What did he say?
He compared Reverend Dr. Bryant to Richard Allen, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman,
Wow.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Just putting him in some serious company.
Yeah, some pretty heavy hitters. And coming from an organization like the NNPA that carries a lot of weight.
Absolutely. So they're signaling they're in it for the long haul.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears now to a whole different topic, national security.
Okay.
There have been some real concerns raised recently by American Oversight.
Right, a watchdog group.
Yes, specifically their executive director, Kioma Chukwu.
Right, I've heard her name.
She's warning about what they're calling a reckless messaging breach within the current administration.
Oh, that sounds serious.
It does.
Yeah.
What exactly are these concerns about?
So the core issue is that high-level officials in the administration, they've been using encrypted messaging apps like Signal.
Signal? Yeah, I use that.
Right, lots of people do.
But for government business.
Yeah, and not just any business. We're talking ongoing military operations.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's a big deal. This isn't, scheduling a meeting or sending a memo.
Right, this is top secret stuff.
Right, potentially highly sensitive information. Active military matters.
But what's Kioma Chukwu saying about this?
She didn't mince words. She called it outright recklessly irresponsible behavior and a direct threat to our national security.
Wow, she's not holding back.
Yeah, and that's coming from a nonpartisan watchdog organization.
Right, American Oversight, they're nonprofit, right?
Yes, nonpartisan. Their whole purpose is to hold the government accountable.
To make sure everything's above board.
Exactly. And this situation is raising red flags for them.
I can see why. So what makes this so concerning?
Well, for one thing, a journalist was accidentally included in one of these encrypted chats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and to their credit, the journalist immediately alerted the authorities.
That's good.
Right, very responsible. But it just shows you how easily sensitive information can be mishandled.
Especially through these less secure channels.
Right, and, Democratic U.S. Rep. Gregory Meeks, he's voiced similar concerns.
So this isn't just coming from one side of the aisle.
No, it seems to be a bipartisan worry.
And how widespread is this? Are we talking about a few isolated incidents or something bigger?
So it's being reported that as many as 18 senior officials were using these apps.
18, that's a lot.
It's not just a couple of people going rogue.
Right, it sounds more systemic.
Yeah, Chukwu herself said it was incredibly unusual, highly unusual, unprecedented.
So this is really uncharted territory.
It is. And using these kinds of platforms for discussing military operations, it creates a real vulnerability.
Right, makes it easier for our adversaries to get access.
Exactly. Chukwu pointed out that state-backed hackers are always trying to break into government systems.
Of course.
So if these discussions are happening on less secure platforms, the risk of foreign actors getting classified information, that's huge.
It could compromise missions, put lives at risk.
Exactly. It's a nightmare scenario.
And Chukwu's concerns go beyond this specific incident, right?
Yeah, she's talking about a bigger problem, a broader erosion of oversight mechanisms.
So she's worried about a weakening of accountability, not just in the executive branch, but also in Congress.
Yeah, it's like the checks and balances that are supposed to safeguard sensitive information, they're not working as well as they should.
So she's painting a pretty concerning picture.
She is. And this all ties into another issue that's been in the news.
What's that?
The legal battle over access to special counsel Jack Smith's report.
Oh, right. The one about former President Trump's handling of classified documents.
Exactly. American Oversight is suing to get those records.
But they've been blocked by a judge.
Yeah, for now. So the concern is that the full report might shed light on a bigger pattern.
A pattern of how national security protocols have been handled in recent years.
Exactly. Understanding the past context could be really important.
It could give us a better sense of how serious these recent messaging breaches are.
Right. So it's all connected.
So the big question is, can the public have confidence that the administration is truly safeguarding national security?
Yeah, especially after this incident with the journalist being accidentally included in those chats.
It really makes you think.
Yeah, it does. It's a fundamental question of trust and accountability
Absolutely.
when it comes to national security.
Okay, well, let's shift gears again. Let's talk about a really positive initiative that's focused on community health.
Okay.
The Conscious Black Beauty Movement. It was launched by the California Black Health Network.
I've read about that. Sounds like a great program.
Yeah, it really is. They launched it during Women's History Month. And it seems like a really meaningful effort to empower Black women.
It is. So the main goal of the movement is to help Black women and girls make safer choices about the beauty products they use.
Right, because a lot of those products contain harmful chemicals.
Exactly. And they want to raise awareness about that so they can prioritize their health.
And this builds on years of activism within the Black community for healthier beauty standards.
Absolutely. It's about more than just individual products.
It's about a whole mindset shift.
Right. And the statistics that the California Black Health Network put out, they're pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, what are some of the key figures?
Well, they said the average woman uses about 12 beauty products every day.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And that could expose them to almost 170 different chemicals.
Wow.
A lot of those are hormone disruptors, which can lead to all sorts of health problems.
And it's not just the products that are explicitly marketed as, conventional or chemical-laden.
Right.
Even the ones that are labeled natural or organic.
Yeah. Supposedly better for you.
They can still contain these harmful ingredients.
Yeah, greenwashing is a big problem.
So it's really buyer beware.
Absolutely. You have to do your research.
And it's important to acknowledge the role that beauty standards play in all of this.
For sure. The California Black Health Network, they pointed out that current beauty standards often promote lighter skin tones and more European features.
Which can be really harmful within the Black community.
Yeah, it can create these unhealthy and unattainable ideals.
And tragically, research shows that products marketed to Black women often have a higher concentration of these harmful ingredients.
It's like a double whammy.
Right. It's really disturbing.
It is. And the economic angle is also really significant.
In what way?
So Black women, they spend an estimated $7.5 billion every year on beauty products.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It's a huge market.
Right.
And that's 9 times more than any other demographic.
So there's a lot of money being spent on products that could potentially be harmful.
Right. And that's a big concern, especially when you consider the health risks associated with things like hair dyes and chemical straighteners.
Which have been linked to breast cancer.
Exactly. It raises all these questions about consumer safety and corporate responsibility.
So what is the Conscious Black Beauty movement trying to do about all of this?
They're trying to create change on a lot of different levels. They want to educate consumers so they can make informed choices.
Right. Give people the knowledge they need.
They also want to advocate for stronger policies and regulations.
To hold the beauty industry accountable.
Right. And they want to empower communities to demand safer products.
So it's about collective action.
Yeah. And ultimately, they want to pressure manufacturers to just remove these toxic ingredients.
Get them out of the products altogether.
Exactly. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Makes sense. And they have a really concrete project that's part of this, the campaign's non-toxic Black Beauty Project.
Right. They actually put together a list of safer products.
I saw that.
78 brands. Almost 700 individual products.
And they're all free of those Tier 1 red list chemicals?
They're the really bad actors.
So how do they come up with this list?
They partnered with an organization called Clearia.
Okay, I've heard of them.
They screen product ingredients against this list of really hazardous chemicals.
Yeah.
The ones that are highly regulated.
Got it.
So by using the screening process, they were able to identify products that are formulated without those specific harmful substances.
That's great. So this list is super valuable for consumers who want to make healthier choices.
Absolutely. And they didn't just keep it to themselves. This information is all publicly available on the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics website.
So people can actually look up these safer options.
Yeah, it's a searchable database, so it's easy to use.
That's great.
And the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, they also have a separate database specifically for Black-owned beauty brands.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, so you can support Black-owned businesses while also taking care of your health.
I love it when those two things come together.
Me too.
So it's really about empowering consumers with information and options.
Yeah. Janet Noodleman, the director of the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, she said it best. It's about celebrating the companies that are already making safer products and hopefully inspiring others to follow their lead.
Right, lead by example.
Exactly.
And ultimately, the California Black Health Network is very clear about what needs to happen.
They need community involvement.
Right, this movement can't succeed without it.
Exactly. So they're asking people to stay informed, spread awareness, support the Black-owned brands that are offering safer products, and advocate for change.
So it's a call to action.
It is. It's about individual choices and collective power.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on to another issue that's close to home here in California: wildfires.
Always a hot topic, unfortunately.
Yes, and it's good to see that there are some legislative efforts underway to improve our wildfire response.
Anything that can help is a good thing.
Right. So one of the key figures in this effort is Senator Kelly Ciardo.
He's the one from Marietta, right?
Yes, he's a Republican, and he brings a ton of experience to this issue.
How so?
He was a firefighter for 35 years.
Wow. So he knows what he's talking about.
He does.
Yeah.
And he was also a mayor and an assembly member, so he understands the challenges from multiple angles.
Yeah, that's valuable.
And he's seen the devastation caused by wildfires firsthand. He actually witnessed the damage in Altadena during the Eaton firestorm.
Yeah, it was a bad one.
Yeah, it was. He said he was surprised by how far the fire spread.
Which is scary because it shows how unpredictable these things can be.
Exactly.
So what's he doing to address this?
Well, it seems like he's really focused on pre-fire preparation and ensuring a fast aerial response.
Makes sense. You have to be proactive, and you have to be able to act quickly when a fire breaks out.
Exactly. So his says it at Bill 90 is specifically about improving that aerial response.
Okay. What does it propose?
It would use funding from Proposition 4
Okay.
to invest in prepositioned mobile rigid water storage units.
So basically, big water tanks that can be moved around.
Right, and mobile rigid dip tanks.
For the helicopters to refill from.
Yes.
Okay. So why are these mobile units so important?
Well, in a lot of areas that are prone to wildfires, you don't have easy access to natural water sources.
Right. Not enough lakes or rivers nearby.
Exactly. So firefighters have to rely on what are called Healy hydrants.
Which are like ground-based water sources for helicopters.
Right. But the problem is that it can take up to 20 minutes for them to refill.
Oh, wow. That's a long time when you're dealing with a fire.
Yeah, those minutes can be crucial.
Absolutely. So these mobile tanks, they're designed to speed up that process.
Ciardo says helicopters can refill from them in about 5 minutes.
So much faster.
Huge difference.
Mm.
And that could be a game changer in terms of containing wildfires early on.
Yeah. If you can get water on the fire quickly, you have a better chance of stopping it from spreading.
Exactly.
What are the costs? Are these mobile units more expensive?
Actually, they're a lot cheaper. They cost somewhere between $65,000 and $95,000 each,
Okay.
whereas the Healy hydrants can cost up to $300,000.
So they're significantly less expensive.
And they're more flexible, too, because they can be moved around and positioned strategically.
Makes them more adaptable to different situations.
Exactly. And they don't require approval from CEQA.
The California Environmental Quality Act?
Right, because they're temporary and movable,
So there's less red tape,
which means they can be deployed more quickly.
which is crucial in an emergency.
Absolutely. So it's a really promising solution.
Yeah, it sounds like a smart investment.
And given all the damage and displacement we've seen from recent firestorms, we need all the help we can get.
We definitely do.
Ciardo's also introduced another bill, SB 87, which focuses on volunteer fire departments.
Oh, interesting. How does that work?
So it proposes a sales tax exemption for all the income that volunteer fire departments generate through fundraising.
Oh, wow, that's great. So it would free up more money for them to use.
Exactly. And this would extend an existing provision in the law.
So it's building on something that's already there.
Right. And it's really important because a lot of communities rely on volunteer fire departments.
Especially the ones that can't afford full-time firefighters.
And these departments, they rely heavily on fundraising to buy equipment and, keep their operations running.
It's tough to make ends meet.
It is. The bill does maintain the current limit of $100,000 in gross receipts for departments to qualify for this exemption.
Okay, so it's targeted to the ones that really need it.
Right. As Ciardo said, these volunteers are often the very first people to arrive at an emergency.
Yeah, they're the front line.
Exactly.
That sounds like a good bill.
I think so. And there's another bill we should mention, too, Assembly Bill 24-7. It was introduced by Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, and this one focuses on the incarcerated firefighters.
Oh, right. The ones who help fight wildfires.
Exactly. And the bill has gotten support from the advocacy group. All of us or none.
Okay, so what does it do?
It proposes raising the hourly wage for incarcerated firefighters to $19 per hour.
So they'd be paid more for their work.
Yes. And the wage would be updated annually.
To keep up with inflation.
Exactly, which is important.
And has this bill made any progress?
Yes, it's actually advanced with bipartisan support in the Assembly Committee on Appropriations.
Oh, wow, that's promising.
It is. It shows that there's growing recognition of the value of the work that these incarcerated firefighters do.
They're putting their lives on the line.
They are Assemblymember
Yeah.
Bryan. He pointed out that during major fire events, these hand crews are absolutely crucial.
Especially in places like LA County.
Right. And they're often working in really tough conditions.
Yeah, it's dangerous work.
It is. So it seems only fair that they're compensated fairly for their labor.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about one last issue. The debate in Congress about potential cuts to Medicaid and other social programs.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is. It's part of this larger push to reduce federal spending.
Right, trying to balance the budget.
But it's causing a lot of anxiety here in California.
Especially for people who rely on those programs.
Exactly. The elderly people with disabilities.
Yeah.
The millions of Californians who are enrolled in Medi-Cal.
Medical is California's version of Medicaid, right?
Right. It's funded by both federal and state dollars,
Okay.
and it provides a wide range of medical services for low-income individuals and families.
Got it. So these cuts could have a huge impact on a lot of people.
They could.
Yeah.
And we're hearing these concerns firsthand from people like Diana Madoshi.
Who is she?
She's a community activist from Placer County.
Okay.
And she spoke at a rally that was organized by Assembly members Pilar Schiavo and Jasmeet Baines.
Okay.
And she was really worried about the potential defunding of these programs, especially for seniors and people with disabilities who rely on Social Security.
She's afraid they'll be left high and dry.
Yeah. And her personal story really illustrates why this is so important.
What happened?
So she was a nurse for 36 years.
Wow, that's a long career.
It is. But she got sick, and her IRA was depleted.
So she had to rely on Social Security.
She did. She called it a vital social safety net.
Makes you realize how important these programs are.
It does. And it's understandable why people are so scared when they hear these programs being called unsustainable.
Right. It feels like the rug could be pulled out from under them at any moment.
Exactly.
What do the numbers say? How many people rely on these programs?
Well, the Social Security Administration, they put out some figures that are pretty staggering.
Okay, what are they?
So in 2023, there were over 70 million Medicare recipients.
70 million. That's huge.
Yeah. And almost 6 million people were newly awarded Social Security benefits.
So that's a lot of people relying on those programs.
It is. And more than half of the recipients are women.
Wow. So it really is a lifeline for a lot of people.
It is. And the SSA is the main income security agency for a huge portion of the population.
So what's the latest? Are they actually going to cut these programs?
Well, the SSA announced that they're closing the Office of Transformation.
What was that office?
It was created by the previous administration to modernize the agency and improve efficiency.
Okay.
But the acting commissioner said they're eliminating wasteful and inefficient offices.
So it's all about cutting costs.
Yeah. And this whole issue of waste and fraud is really at the center of this debate.
Because if they can prove that there's a lot of waste and fraud, then they can justify the cuts, right?
Right. And the former Trump administration, they actually issued a press release about this whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, they said they're committed to protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits.
So they weren't planning on cutting them.
They said they wouldn't cut them.
Okay.
But they also emphasized their focus on eliminating waste and fraud.
Right. Make the system more efficient.
Exactly. And the U.S. Government Accountability Office, they've estimated that over $500 billion are lost annually to fraud.
$500 billion. That's insane.
There's a lot of money, and a lot of it is within entitlement programs.
So it makes sense that they'd want to crack down on that.
It does. But the question is, will those efforts to reduce waste and fraud be enough to satisfy the people who are pushing for bigger cuts?
Right. Will it actually prevent those cuts from happening?
Exactly. And Assemblymember Schiavo, she's very concerned about this. She's worried that the cuts will go way beyond just addressing fraud.
She thinks they'll end up cutting essential services.
Yeah, the ones that people really depend on.
That would be awful.
It would. And she introduced a resolution, Assembly Joint Resolution 3.
What does it do?
It urges California's representatives in Congress to vote against any cuts or privatization of these programs.
So she's trying to rally support to protect those programs.
Yes. And she's also calling on the former president to veto any legislation that would make those cuts.
So she's really making her voice heard.
She is. And the potential cuts to Medicaid that are being discussed, they're huge.
How big are we talking?
Up to $880 billion or more.
Oh my gosh, that's a massive amount.
It is. And Assemblymember Schiavo, she's really worried about the impact on California.
Yeah, what would happen if those cuts went through?
Well, she said it would devastate essential healthcare facilities like trauma centers and urgent care centers.
Those are critical for so many communities.
They are. And she said it very clearly. These cuts are not an option for California.
She's drawing a line in the sand.
She is. And this fight is personal for her, too.
How so?
Her father was a veteran who relied on Social Security benefits.
Okay.
And he passed away just the day before she spoke at that rally.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So she vowed to fight these cuts in his honor and for everyone else who would be harmed by them.
So it's not just politics for her. It's deeply personal.
Exactly.
So these potential cuts to social safety net programs, they pose a huge challenge for California.
They do.
And it really could have devastating consequences for a lot of people.
It's something we need to pay close attention to.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, you can see how wide-ranging these issues are.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
Yeah.
From economic activism and boycotts to national security, concerns the Black Beauty movement, wildfire preparedness, and social safety nets.
It's amazing how it all connects.
It is. It shows how interconnected our world is.
And it's a reminder that these issues, they touch on fundamental aspects of our society.
Values like economic empowerment, government transparency, health equity, environmental responsibility, and social justice.
It makes you think about how individuals can create positive change. What are the levers for change in each of these areas? And how can our actions as individuals contribute to broader societal shifts?
Those are the big questions.
They are, and they're worth thinking about.
They are. Thanks for joining me for another deep dive.
My pleasure.
I always learn so much from these conversations.
Me too. It's always a good reminder that we need to stay engaged and informed.
We do, because the world is constantly changing, and we need to keep up.
Absolutely, and that's why we do the deep dive, to help people make sense of it all.
Exactly.
And to empower them to take action.
Right. So keep reading, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll see you next time.